All right, picture this. Europe, early 1900s. It's like a giant, tense party where everyone is secretly building up their armies, just in case. This period is often called the powder keg of Europe, and for good reason. You've got these big empires all staring at each other, making alliances and flexing their military muscles. The two main teams forming were the Triple Entente, which included France, Russia, and Great Britain, and the Triple Alliance, made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Think of it as two rival school clubs who promise to have each other's backs if a fight breaks out. This system of alliances meant that a small conflict could quickly escalate into a massive, continent-wide war. Everyone was connected, and everyone was nervous. Adding to the tension was a fierce sense of nationalism. People were incredibly proud of their countries and were willing to do anything for them. At the same time, imperialism was in full swing. These European powers were competing for colonies and resources all over the world, which just added more fuel to the fire. It was a recipe for disaster, and all it needed was a single spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting with his wife, Sophie. A Serbian nationalist group, wanting to break away from Austro-Hungarian rule, planned an assassination. After a first failed attempt with a bomb, a young man named Gavrilo Princip got a second chance. He spotted the Archduke's car, which had taken a wrong turn, and he didn't miss. Both Franz Ferdinand and his wife were shot and killed. Austria-Hungary was furious. They blamed Serbia for the attack, and, with a blank check of support from their powerful ally Germany, they issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia agreed to most of the demands, but not all of them. That was enough for Austria-Hungary. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, they declared war on Serbia. And this is where those alliances kicked in, like a chain of dominoes. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic people in Serbia, started mobilizing its army. Germany saw this as a threat and declared war on Russia. Since France was allied with Russia, Germany declared war on France, too. Germany's plan, the Schlieffen Plan, involved a quick strike through neutral Belgium to capture Paris before Russia could fully mobilize. But when Germany invaded Belgium, Great Britain, who had promised to protect Belgium's neutrality, declared war on Germany. And just like that, within a few weeks, the great powers of Europe were at war. What started as a regional conflict had exploded into what would be known as the Great War. People at the time thought it would be over by Christmas. They couldn't have been more wrong. The war quickly devolved into a brutal stalemate, especially on the Western Front, which stretched across France and Belgium. This is where trench warfare became the grim reality for millions of soldiers. Both sides dug vast networks of trenches, separated by a deadly no-man's land. Life in the trenches was horrific. Soldiers faced constant shelling, machine gun fire, mud, rats, and disease. Commanders would order massive frontal assaults, sending waves of soldiers over the top into a hail of bullets. These attacks rarely gained much ground and resulted in staggering casualties. Battles like the Somme and Verdun became infamous for their sheer scale of death, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers lost for just a few miles of territory. The war became a grinding battle of attrition, where each side tried to wear the other down. Meanwhile, the war wasn't just on land. At sea, Britain used its powerful navy to blockade Germany, cutting off vital supplies. Germany responded with a new and terrifying weapon, the U-boat or submarine. They began sinking not just military ships, but also civilian and merchant vessels. This unrestricted submarine warfare would have major consequences. The war also introduced terrifying new technologies. Machine guns made defense incredibly powerful, while heavy artillery could rain down destruction from miles away. Poison gas was used for the first time, causing agonizing suffering. Tanks were developed to break through trench lines, and airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, soon became armed fighters dogfighting in the skies. This was modern, industrialized warfare on a scale never seen before. For several years, neither side could gain a decisive advantage. But a few key events in 1917 changed the course of the war. First, Russia, crippled by the war and internal turmoil, underwent a revolution. The new Bolshevik government, led by Vladimir Lenin, signed a peace treaty with Germany and pulled out of the war. This was a huge win for Germany, as they could now move all their troops from the Eastern Front to the west. But as one major power left, another one entered. The United States had tried to stay neutral, but Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, which had sunk American ships, and the discovery of the Zimmermann telegram, a secret message from Germany to Mexico proposing an alliance against the U.S., pushed them over the edge. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. The arrival of fresh American troops and supplies gave a massive boost to the exhausted Allied forces. In the spring of 1918, Germany launched a final, massive offensive, hoping to win the war before the Americans could arrive in full force. It almost worked. They pushed deep into Allied territory, but the exhausted German army couldn't sustain the attack. The Allies, now reinforced by the Americans, launched a powerful counteroffensive known as the 100 Days Offensive. They pushed the Germans back, and Germany's allies began to collapse. With its army in retreat and its people starving at home due to the blockade, Germany's leaders realized the war was lost. The Kaiser abdicated, and the new German government asked for an armistice or a ceasefire. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. The Great War was over. The world was left to count the cost. Over 16 million people, both soldiers and civilians, were dead. Empires had crumbled: the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, the Russian, and the German. The aftermath of the war was shaped by the Treaty of Versailles. The victorious Allies, particularly France, Britain, and the U.S., imposed harsh terms on Germany. Germany was forced to accept full blame for the war, pay massive reparations, disarm its military, and give up territory. This war guilt clause created deep resentment in Germany, which would have devastating consequences down the road. World War I redrew the map of Europe and the Middle East, created new nations, and left a legacy of loss and trauma that would define the 20th century. It was called the War to End All Wars, but tragically, the unresolved issues and bitterness it left behind would set the stage for an even more destructive conflict just 2 decades later. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful and want to see more simplified history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one.